Well, everyone, we have our agenda document that was emailed out earlier today, and we've got some folks who are providing answers to the icebreaker questions. So tonight we are asking for your name, your chapter affiliation, and your favorite summer travel destination. And so Brad has dropped the agenda in the chat window again for those of you who are using the Zoom video call line and are at your computer watching with us. For those who are dialing in by phone, we'll do our best to keep you all in, but you can find a copy of the agenda in the email that was sent out earlier. It looks like folks may be having, looks like Jeff may be having some trouble logging in. So I'm going to go ahead and get our call started and share some of the YNPN National Network updates before handing the mic over to the regional leads to share some other updates with you all. Hi, for those of you I haven't had a chance to meet yet, or for those of you who may be seeing me on video for the first time, I'm Jamie Smith. I'm the Executive Director at YNPN National. I'm based in Portland, Oregon, which I see a couple people have listed as one of their favorite summertime travel destinations. Portland is actually pretty great in the summertime. I would say that one of my favorite summertime travel destinations is somewhere a little bit cooler. I don't love the heat. I see Carlos nodding a little bit. Carlos is with me on that. So if you all haven't had a chance yet, if you'll drop your name, your chapter, and your favorite summertime travel destination into the agenda, that gives us a chance to know who's on the call and also get a chance to learn a little bit more about you and connect around common interests. Starting off our agenda tonight, we have a couple of national network updates. Many of them are about the conference, which is coming up next month. I am so excited. We are less than 8 weeks away from this year's national conference. It'll be taking place in Indianapolis from July 28th to the 30th. We have registration is now open, and we have a lot of information for you about the conference, including the schedule, as well as some tools that can help you use, that can help you justify to your employer why the national conference is a great professional development opportunity. If you perhaps have the opportunity to get funding from your organization or to justify paid time off to attend the conference. We also have discounts for chapter leaders to attend the conference. We also encourage you to share the conference opportunity with your members. There's a discount for members, and we do also have a virtual component to the conference. So for those who are unable to travel to be with us in person in Indianapolis, you can follow along with some of the content, specifically our keynote and some of our professional development sessions. You can follow along with us from home. We also have a tradition at the national conference that is one of my favorite parts of the national conference. And I think we've heard from other chapter leaders that it's a great source of inspiration and ideas and a way to learn about what everyone in the network is doing. And that is our chapter roll call. So we're asking for all of the chapters to contribute to the chapter roll call by July 15th. It's a pretty quick, simple exercise. We're asking you to share with us 3 slides, your proudest accomplishment from last year, a burning question that you have for other chapters or for the network, and then also areas of expertise or things that you can share with other chapters. So some of the things that we've seen are signature events, new membership launches as proudest accomplishments, and areas of expertise that people have shared in the past have included things like marketing or organizational membership or budgeting, or something that your chapter just does really well that you'd be happy to share with other chapters. We are also having a chapter challenge this year to see which chapters can get the most members registered for the conference and their associated. Brad has created a list of the standings right now in terms of which chapters have had the most folks registered so far. Don't worry, YNPN National is disqualified from this competition. We kind of have an unfair advantage because we bring the national board. But it's exciting to see folks registering. And if you haven't yet registered for the conference, please do so and share with your members. I see that Jeff is able to join us looking super sharp and dapper. So I will turn it over to you, Jeff, to talk a little bit about the network investment fee and the Nation Builder data sync.
Awesome. Can everyone hear me? Yes? Okay, terrific. Yeah, they made me dress up for meetings today, so unfortunately I had to walk around in a suit, but I'll take it. So welcome everyone. Hope you're all doing well. So just a quick add-in and note about the network investment fee. We've gotten a great response from a lot of the chapters that I reached out to. Seems like everyone's settling in for the year. And I think the majority, if not all of you at this point, have kind of heard from me about either your invoice or arranging payment for the network investment fee. So we really appreciate kind of the quick responses and getting back to us to take care of that. There may be one or two chapters that I'll follow up with, but that's kind of been squared away. The other main item that you may have me reaching out to, and if you know any of your chapters are still working on this, is we are very excited to be getting the rest of our chapters set up in Nation Builder to share your member tags with us and have data sync. Just some context about why that's really important and exciting. If you were part of the network during the affiliation agreement discussions, kind of National having really up-to-date, detailed information about who we serve and the demographics for all of the chapters was a really important point for funding, for advocacy, to be able to communicate, I think, clearly to funders the impact that the work that YNPN does has on the sector and the benefits that all of our members see from that. So as we get all of the chapters able to share their member data with us on Nation Builder, we're able to have a much more detailed snapshot about who the membership of YNPN is, what type of organizations they work at in the sector, and a lot of other really important information, both for funders, but then also to figure out what type of programming we need to be offering to best benefit the general membership of the entire national network. Other kind of really exciting piece to that you'll be hearing more about in the coming weeks, maybe months, is our first member survey. So our awesome data fellow, Liam, has been working on putting that together. And again, having kind of a comprehensive member survey was a really big goal of the affiliation agreement. So I think we're all really excited to see that rolled out for all the chapters to be able to share that with their members. And then for us to get some really great information moving forward that we can use to help with programming and fundraising and all sorts of interesting projects that will help all the chapters in the network. Hopefully I will see many of you at the conference in Indianapolis. It's hard to believe it's been a year, but really looking forward to connecting with everyone. And the last thing that I would say is if your chapter still needs any assistance with Nation Builder projects, I know many of you are now up on the platform, but you may be looking to do some advanced things now. You can always reach out to me via email, shoot me a note, and I'm happy to help on, or hop on with your team and help out with whatever you're working on at the moment. All right, so I think that covers the remainder of the national network updates. And so I will turn it over to Rebecca to chat about shared responsibility and decision-making in terms of the affiliation agreement and chapter Congress.
All right, can you guys hear me okay? Yeah, awesome. Sorry, let me pull up the, so I know we've talked about this previously in other chapter Congress calls as chapter Congress being a place for chapters to work together and make decisions together. And Carlos will outline more about the affiliation agreement after me, but some of the things that we outlined already in the affiliation agreement last year are in the table within the agenda. And I think the thing for perhaps additional review and feedback is if anything within this table that shows what national board and staff are responsible for within the decision-making process, and then national board and staff with chapter input, the co-creation and co-decision between chapters, national board, and staff, and then where chapters make decision with input from national and chapters make decision with the transparency on the results. So as you guys can see, it's a nice breakdown of how we think that this collaboration can work between national and the various chapters. But this is within the affiliation agreement on page 26 to 27. So as you're looking in here, if you want to do any comments or feedback on if you think certain things within this are higher priority or not, and if there's other things you have questions about or think need to be addressed within this layout, I think that would be the most helpful for national and for the board and staff, and for us as the regional leads to help provide additional information to you all.
Rebecca, I'm just going to add to that real quick. And I think an additional part of where this shared responsibility table is coming from is that the regional leads and the network engagement committee really need your guys' support as chapter leaders and as the Congress reps for your chapters to be engaged and to be present in these calls so that we can determine what topics and issues we need to discuss at the network level, and what we can do to work together to move those issues forward, to work with the national board and staff to have a position on something or advocate for something or find a partner that'll help us educate you guys on a topic. And we really need that engagement from you guys. Is really critical.
And if I can add to that, we Chapter Congress this year is kind of like a whole brand new spanking, dare I say, sexy Chapter Congress, in which we really have an opportunity as a network for us to really come together and work out some things that need to be worked out. And the things on this table are things that back when we were still, prior to the affiliation agreement, kind of figuring out like what are these things that we still have to figure out. There were all these open questions, and we kind of realized that these are things that at different levels we all have different responsibility for. But this is a great starting point to really move Chapter Congress in the direction of being a working group, which is the ultimate goal for Chapter Congress. Is the regional leads, we're here to represent you guys, but we're also your peers. We want to use this as a space in which we can address some of these questions. But it really, I think, requires us thinking about which, we're not going to be able to answer all of these questions within the first year, but really thinking about like, is there something that we need to prioritize over something else? And using that as a starting point as we continue to develop and grow Chapter Congress. Again, it's kind of a brand new structure for us, so there's some growing pains associated with that we're working with. And I think this is a great starting point for us to really think about where should we get started with the work that needs to happen.
Yeah, and Bradley, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this table was from 17 or maybe even earlier than that. So like both of them said, this definitely is a great starting point, but we would like to update it and revise it for sure this year and make sure we're reflecting all of the different things that you all have issues and questions and need support from us and national and the board from.
Yeah, to answer that question, this table is from 2016, was developed as part of the first iteration of the affiliation agreement.
Okay, so I guess if we don't have any questions, I'll just let Carlos move into the affiliation agreement.
All right. So at the last Congress call, we talked about the affiliation agreement being up for renewal at the end of the year, and how now is really a great time for us to review it, since it's the first time that we're coming to sort of this conclusion of a first term with the agreement. So we did share a Google form to collect information from chapter leaders, try to collate some data. We did receive some feedback. However, to Bradley's point about needing chapter participation, out of the 40 plus chapters in the network, we only got responses from 2 chapters. So thank you very much to those chapter leaders who participated. There's still an opportunity for folks to review and provide feedback. We did take the information provided and talk about it during the Network Engagement Committee call last month. So your feedback is reviewed and discussed. It is very important to us. One of the big questions that we are looking at feedback on is regarding the renewal period, which is something that we brought up before. Some feedback from National, there's interest in changing the agreement into an ongoing contract instead of an annual or semi-annual renewal. And I think that really focuses on the transitional nature of our chapters. So really thinking about as intimately familiar as we can get with this agreement, there's, all of our chapters struggle with retention of institutional knowledge just based on the transitional nature of chapter leaders. We're not around forever. So thinking about how to manage, an agreement in which, different folks are at the table at different times throughout the year. And really how, if we're going to be able to talk about it, we need to do it in a way that maybe allows for us to just get this done smoothly, and perhaps, automatic renewal is a solution to that. Any amendments have to be discussed. We did receive some feedback from chapters as well. Both of those chapters commented on the renewal period. Again, that's something that we really want to hear from you guys about. There were additional comments that were more specific to certain details within the agreement. That feedback is laid out for you on the agenda. We won't go into all the detail. Again, we're grateful to the chapters who did provide that feedback. That form closed initially prior to the announcement about YMPN National's financial standing. So we sort of recognize that may change certain folks' perspectives on the affiliation agreement. So we are extending the opportunity for folks to be able to provide feedback to us. Again, we need everyone's participation in this in order to make sure that we have an agreement that makes sense for the network. Now is the time to do that. So we really appreciate everyone's participation.
I see there's a really great question in the chat from Anna. She asks how other chapters collect information from their chapter for feedback that YNPN National requests. I think we have a moment if there's anyone on the line, any chapter Congress reps who want to share some of your best practices or some of the ways that you gather feedback from your chapter around some of the questions that come up in chapter Congress.
This is Emily Reed with YMPN of OKC. We probably don't do as good of a job as we should in reaching out to general membership, but I ask my fellow board members when National prompts us with surveys or questionnaires or wants feedback. And then as appropriate, I ask our various chairs to ask our volunteers who are a little bit more familiar with YNPN and YNPN National to give their feedback via their chairs as well. And then we have on occasion on more broad things, not as something specific as the affiliation agreement, but we have even included polls in our emails or on our social media for kind of more general or fun type things.
I see a response in the chat from Elizabeth Warner's saying, we have an agenda item for me to report back to the board national on items, and then I synthesize the information back to Congress via the form. And I can piggyback on that as a chapter leader myself. Historically, chapter Congress rep has been a position on our board, so it's someone's responsibility to take what is going on at the national level and report back at every board meeting every month on things that are going on across the network and at national, and really use that as an opportunity to, as needed, if we have to have a discussion, report back to national. All right, well, unless anyone has any other suggestions for how to collect information, I think we can move on to the next portion of the agenda, which Lee is handling if he's on the call.
Yep. Can you hear me all right?
We can hear you.
All right, perfect. All right. So looking at the strategic plan, and when we last looked at the strategic plan, I think around April or so, things were a little bit different back then. I guess a little bit calmer, but we definitely want to still have a focus on the strategic plan as much as possible. We have a preview doc that just outlines a quick 3-page summary of what the strategic plan looks like in its current state for the next 3 years or so. Of course, some of our measurements are going to change, but generally our major goals are trying to stay the same from what we've last discussed. There also are some discussion items that we like to have at the conference itself, just to really have input collectively from the attendees, as well as anyone who participates in these calls or anything of that nature. Because like Carlos and Rebecca both emphasized, we're trying to have as much input from folks. We want to make sure it's as collective as possible. Trying to think. But yeah, there's a few different areas that we like to highlight, specific bullet points on advocacy, like what kind of goals are we trying to advocate for, or if there are any issues that we like to advocate for. So we definitely like to have any kind of input on that particular end. If anybody has any questions or any suggestions on the strategic plan, please feel free to list those out in any way.
Would it, let me see. I don't know, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm not at home, I'm on a borrowed computer. So my thought is, if you're looking at feedback of how the chapter Congress can be involved, are we looking at dedicating a part of every meeting to look at different parts of the strategic plan, or how will it be visited on a continual basis?
That's a great question, Anna. I think maybe having Chapter Congress look at an aspect of the plan on a rotating basis could be an excellent way to do it. I would love to hear feedback or suggestions on what you guys are hungry for or how you'd like to engage with the strategic plan. So as Lee said, we have been working on the strategic plan for quite a while now. It has only work on the strategic plan has been paused as we've been doing some emergency fundraising after the news from the Kellogg Foundation, but we are still moving forward with completing the strategic plan as envisioned previously, and seeing it as a goal to work towards in terms of getting funding to move to full capacity. So the next steps with the strategic plan are that we'll be sharing it with the network this month and next month and discussing it at the conference. Specifically, some of the questions that are listed in the agenda around how do we specifically work as a network to achieve the results that we've identified, both from conversations that have happened at the national board level, but also conversations that happened at last year's conference and in a task force that met at the end of last year and the beginning of this year. So we have a few touch points and opportunities for conversation in other spaces in the network, specifically the conference, but having Chapter Congress look at the strategic plan or help to develop strategies would be a great way to do that. We also have a few areas of work where chapter leaders are invited to be part of the groups that help set the strategy. So for example, our Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee, our EDI committee, meets once a month and helps to set the strategy for achieving our goals and results around equity, diversity, and inclusion. We are also working to add other opportunities for chapter leaders to be part of some of those high-level strategic discussions. But if those kinds of conversations are the kinds of conversations you'd like to have at Chapter Congress, we'd welcome that feedback as well. And so you can share it here with us on the call today in the agenda, or by reaching out to your regional leads to let them know that that's something that you'd like to see on the agenda.
Yeah. All right, that's a good question, Anna. So would we like to move on, Jamie, to the next section, YMPN National Financial Sustainability?
Sure, I'll go ahead and pick that up. So as we've kind of alluded to a couple of times on the call so far tonight, and as we shared with you all last month, we received some significant and disappointing news last month. We were notified that a major grant that was expected to be a significant source of revenue for YNPN National this year wasn't renewed. And so that has caused us or required us to significantly adjust our budget and expenses for this year, and also to do some emergency fundraising to replace those resources and to get the resources that we need to continue operations through the end of the year. So you can find a link to the full letter that we sent out in May that provides information and details. We also held a call with the network last month to go over, or perhaps it was earlier this month, but held a call to go over in more detail the financial situation. And so what I wanted to share with you all today were a couple of updates on what's happened since the last time that we spoke with you all about it, and also talk about some of the opportunities that are coming up to get involved in helping to strategize about how we get to a position of long-term sustainability for YNPN National and for our network. So most urgently, we have been in conversations with a few funders about bridge funding and funding that can help us support our operations at least a basic level through the end of the year. We've had some really promising conversations, and I think that it is likely that we are going to be able to avoid closure and to continue to operate at least a basic level through the end of 2018. Unfortunately, the loss of this grant meant that closure of YNPN National was actually a very real risk. And so while we are still working to finalize those commitments with our funders, I think it is likely that we will be able to secure that funding and to be able to continue operations through the end of 2018, which gives us the opportunity to strategize about sustainability for the long term, and also some runway to continue fundraising to get beyond just a basic level of operations. And what I mean when I say a basic level of operations is that, unfortunately, due to the loss of this grant, we are going to need to lay off staff after the conference in July. And at the end of August, our current group of Launchpad Fellows will end their tenure with YNPN. So as of right now, it is highly likely that I will be the only staff person at YNPN National after the end of August, which I am grateful to be able to continue to do this work, but it does mean that our capacity will be limited. And so we are using the time that we have now, knowing that that is likely going to be our staffing situation, to prepare for how to cover all of the work and responsibilities of YNPN National, but we're also being transparent with all of you about our staffing situation and ask for your continued patience and grace with us as we continue to do this fundraising work to be able to hopefully return to our previous staffing levels of at least 2 full-time staff people and a group of fellows working at YNPN National. We also have a couple of calls to learn more about the financial situation at YNPN National. On July 9th, we're going to be doing a basic training that was previously planned with the treasurer of the YNPN National Board, Brandy Tuck. It'll be just a basic training on how to read a budget and key financial reports, and we'll be drawing from YNPN National's financials to share that information with you. This is intended as a training that's just kind of like a general education background. Your members are welcome to attend. It is intended to be a kind of financial management 101 and how to read some key documents. On July 18th, we'll be presenting the YNPN national budget and doing a Q&A. Our budget has obviously shifted since learning the news about the Kellogg grant renewal. And so we'll be presenting what the original 2018 budget was, as well as sharing with you all the adjustments that we've made in the wake of receiving this financial news. So if you are interested in nonprofit finance or interested in learning more about budgeting and financial documents, or if you're interested in getting a deep dive into the YNPN national budget, these calls may be interesting to you or to your members. And so we encourage you to let your fellow board members know, and your members, if you're so inclined, about these calls that'll be coming up next month. Also coming up over this month and next month are the work of our think tanks that we have convened in order to begin strategizing together about sustainability and also priorities for YNPN National. We have 2 think tanks that are gathering to address those questions. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the think tank format, it is something that developed as part of the original Affiliation Agreement discussions in 2016. It is a way that we have discovered, or I guess I should say a way that we've developed, of collaborating between chapter leaders, YNPN National staff members, and YNPN National board members to bring the combined perspectives and expertise of those groups together to tackle problems in the network. And so we have a think tank that is going to be working on strategizing about the financial sustainability of YNPN National, specifically thinking about how we can diversify YNPN National's income beyond grant funding. Part of the challenge, or I should say, why we have gotten into the situation with Kellogg is in large part because of our reliance on grant funding. Grant funding is critical and important and has been a really valuable source of support for YNPN National, but being overly reliant on grant funding makes us vulnerable to the kind of funder and priority shifts that we saw happen with the Kellogg grant this spring. And so we're looking to work with chapter leaders to think about how we as a network could diversify our sources of income, how we could gather more resources from within our network, in addition to some of the philanthropic fundraising that we already do. The second think tank is going to be thinking about how we should prioritize the work of YNPN National. As I mentioned earlier, it is likely that after August, I'll be YNPN's sole staff person, at least temporarily, which means that we'll have limited capacity to be able to do the work that we normally do for the network. I am optimistic that we will be able to fundraise to return to a second full-time staff person. But even with 2 full-time staff people and Launchpad fellows, the capacity of YNPN National is limited unless we're able to raise additional resources. And so what the prioritization think tank will be examining is which of the responsibilities that YNPN National holds are most critical. How do we make sure that operationally we are meeting the most critical needs, and thinking perhaps creatively about how we might be able to meet some of the network's other needs if YNPN National's staff and our capacity continues to be limited. And so the think tanks have already formed, and we have scheduled our calls between now and the conference. However, if you are interested in participating in a think tank, you can reach out to Brad at chaptersupport@ynpn.org. And if the calls work with your schedule, we would be happy to have you join us. The groups are going to begin meeting next week. So if you're interested, this is your final chance to get involved. If the already scheduled calls work with your schedule. But we have a great group of chapter leaders. We have about 10 to 12 chapter leaders who have already signed up to participate in each of those think tanks. And I'm excited to see that there's a range of folks from chapters all over the country, as well as folks who are from more established and larger chapters, as well as chapter leaders who are coming to us from some of our newer chapters and even some of our startup chapters. So I think we'll have a broad range of perspectives who are helping to weigh in on solving some of these problems. And I'm excited for what we'll develop in these think tanks and what we'll be sharing with you all at the national conference and in a follow-up call that'll take place after the national conference for those who aren't able to join us in person in Indianapolis. I'll pause there to see if there's any questions about the financial situation or anything related to the think tanks and the budget work. So
I have a question.
Yeah,
oh, sorry.
No, that's all right.
This is Kimberly from YNPN San Diego. And hypothetically, so obviously staffing is going to be cut, and Jamie will be the only staff for hopefully a short period of time. Hypothetically, if there's a lull in funding to replenish staff, will it just be Jamie, or will it go back to more of a volunteer run national, or how is that potentially looking as like a backup plan?
That's a great question, Kimberly, and I think that's one of the primary questions for the prioritization think tank, is that if we are unable to raise money either to return to a higher level of staffing, or if we are only able to raise money to operate at the level that we've been consistently able to operate in the last few years, which is just 2 staff people, I think that we as a network have some strategizing and thinking to do about how we want to continue and what is most important for us as a network, and what we see the role of the national staff being. I think that's a question. The reason that we are forming the prioritization think tank is because we believe that's a question that YNPN National cannot answer alone. We at YNPN National see YNPN National as the stewards of the network. So folks who are here to serve the purposes of the network, to help do work that it makes sense to do collectively. And so in light of this financial news, we're asking you all to help us determine what makes sense depending on our fundraising success. So I'm not able to answer that question for you today, but that is essentially the critical question that the prioritization think tank is going to be addressing.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, great question. Thank you. I see a question as well from Dominique in the chat. She asks, I'd like to know if National is still going to be offering the subsidy price for the conference for chapters to attend in light of your reduced funding for next year. So Dominique, I'm not sure if you're asking about this year's conference or next year's conference, but we are still offering travel support for this year's conference, for the 2018 conference. For the 2019 conference, it is difficult for me to say what the conference structure will look like. To be totally frank and transparent, given our financial situation at this moment, it is a question as to whether we'll be able to host a 2019 conference. We're only able to operate just at a very basic level, and planning the conference is a large and expensive undertaking, but also a very valuable and important one, and it is a priority for us to be able to host a conference in 2019 if we are able to. As for travel support and subsidies for chapter leaders, I will be honest that I'm not sure if this is something that is sustainable for us long term. Travel support for the chapters to attend the conference costs about $25,000 a year. It's a significant portion of the conference budget every year, and it's something that we've prioritized because it is a priority for YNPN National to have as many chapter leaders at the conference as possible. However, it is a significant expense. And so that is one of the things that we'll be talking about with the financial sustainability think tank is whether it's an expense that makes sense given some of the other expenses that we have and the overall picture of sustainability at YNPN National. So we will continue to keep you all posted about the 2019 conference and what travel support will look like if we're able to host a 2019 conference. But I hope that that answer helps shed kind of a little bit of light on sort of what our thinking might be and what some of the changes might be, that some of the changes that might occur to the conference given our financial situation right now. Are there any other questions about that? Oh, Melissa, I see you have your hand raised.
Yes, so not so much a question as a comment. As the chair of the YNPN National Network Engagement Committee, I just want to echo Jamie's sentiment about the priority that YNPN National places in all of our activity on adding value to the network as a network. YNPN National does not have a purpose beyond the value of the whole network. And I'm really grateful to each of the people on this call, to each of the chapters represented, because I think that the strength of the network is present in Chapter Congress, in our regional leads, in the commitment of the people who facilitate this kind of collaborative work. It is precisely that kind of collaboration that animates and energizes YNPN National, and it is what will be required for YNPN as a national network to continue to be vital, to continue to be creative and a voice that's reflective of and also resourcing to young nonprofit professionals across the country. So these are challenging questions that are coming up, and I think that the people who are here are in a wonderful position to resource the network by identifying others who can bring their creativity and energy to imagining what's possible in light of some challenging changes.
Thanks, Melissa. Yes, I want to echo Melissa's thanks for all of you who have joined on the call and have asked questions, either in the agenda or out loud or privately via email, or have like sent messages of support and encouragement, or have just listened and shared this information with the rest of your chapter. It's a challenging time financially, but I definitely know that we have the resources internally, the non-financial resources, obviously, but the resources and the people internally to meet this challenge. So thank you all for being part of the team and for showing up to help figure this out. I'll pause one last time for any questions about the financial situation before we wrap up the call this evening. All right, well, thank you all for taking a little bit of time out of your evening to join us tonight. I really appreciate it. You can see at the bottom of the agenda a lot of key helpful information for you. Our next chapter Congress call is going to be on Monday, August 13th. If you haven't already registered for the conference, that will be our next big gathering to discuss strategy, and that's July 28th to the 30th in Indianapolis. You can also find at the end of the agenda a list of resources and other information that you can share with your fellow chapter leaders. Melissa, are you eagerly wanting to share excitement for Indianapolis?
Yes, so Indianapolis is my home, and the YNPN Indy chapter is just tremendous, and we are really, really excited to welcome you here. The lead sponsor is actually the School of Philanthropy, where I work. I cannot claim any responsibility for that, but I'm just very excited to see some of the opportunities that will be available, and to meet those of you who I've not met in person before, and to hang out with those of you who I've enjoyed spending time with in the past. So can't wait to have you in Indy just over a month away.
Yeah, Melissa is right. There's a lot of really amazing content planned. The theme of this year's conference is advocacy and equity. And so almost all of the content falls into one of those categories, two pretty critical skill sets and competencies for emerging leaders like us right now. Also, we have an innovation tour where you can go and pet baby elephants. That relates to neither advocacy nor equity, but it's pretty amazing, and I'm disappointed that I'm not going to be able to go. So those of you who are coming as attendees, please go and pet all the baby elephants for me. And if baby elephants and advocacy and equity doesn't get you to come, I don't know what will. But I'm looking forward to, as Melissa said, seeing many of you in Indianapolis, new faces and old faces, old friends. So thank you all for joining us tonight. Please feel free to reach out if you have any other questions or feedback. And we'll talk to you all again as a chapter congress in August. So we'll do our unmute and our traditional goodbye. Good night, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Good night, everyone.
Bye.